we are about to double the built environment over the next 30 to 40 years. We are not just going to double the built environment, we are also going to double the land coverage of human civilization somewhere in the next 20 to 30 years. So when you look at those images and you think of our cities and you think to yourself, how are we going to double the built environment in the next 30 to 40 years? That's just hard to comprehend. And when we look at those images all over the world, it is clear to us that we forgot something. It is clear to us that we forgot that we are part of nature and that we need nature for our existence. And it's clear that during the pandemic, many people left city centers because they did not want to live in buildings anymore. They did not want to be without access to nature. So what is the solution? We move out of the city, we move to the suburbs. But the suburbs might provide a little bit more light and a little bit more air and a little bit more nature, but it doesn't enjoy the amazing things that we have in cities. We live in cities because we love each other. We live in cities because we want to be close to other people. We love the serendipity. We love the culture. We love the ability to interact and to grow intellectually, financially, and in every aspect. And the suburbs does not provide that. So what does that mean? We need a massive change. For me, it means a couple of different things. One, we have to start collaborating. We have to start thinking as a community. Before we talk about architecture, we need a new strategy, urban planning strategy. Our goal is to live in harmony with nature. That's the horizon. So when we look at our mandate as a company, our interest is to stop urban sprawl from continuing, to convince municipalities, to convince zoning authorities, to convince urban planners that there are better ways to plan and there are better ways to think about how we organize ourselves. And this is a new design ambition, right? Nature organizes everything in cell formation. And when you look at those forms, you realize that those forms have nothing to do with our Cartesian grid, right? Our orthogonal grid, which is always everything is a box. Everything is 90 degrees. And when you look at this geometry, and you start to understand that there is very, very, very strong reasons for this geometry that repeats in every scale under the microscope and also on the telescope, you start to realize that maybe it's time to organize ourselves like that. So what if we can grow cities like nature does? Now, there is nobody to blame, because only 30 years ago, we drew cities by hand, with pencil and with erasers on papers. And then the computer arrived and allowed us to create plans digitally. And then the technology evolved, but today we have the technological capability to really work in three-dimensional ways, to really understand very complex data. And this is a time where we can start thinking about how we plan cities just like nature does. So I'm going to talk to you today about the benefits of organizing cities in cell formations. Now, when we are comparing environments, and for the case today I brought a diagram that shows Manhattan, 56% built area, and we compare the same percentages, 56% of built area, but you can see that the roads in the cities are taking 43% versus in the organization of cell formation, it gets reduced to 18%. So in exchange, we can return a quarter of the land to be natural environment, whether that natural environment is there already or whether we are going to return and replenish the natural environment. And this is another comparison that just shows it the same thing in a three-dimensional way, where you can basically understand that the same exact massing is just organized in a different composition, but results in a tremendous reduction of road and road infrastructure for the benefit of having natural environment in the center of every community. So over the last several years, we spent a lot of time understanding the compositions of how cities should look like. And we realized that every project is going to look different based on the land, terrain, the complexity of the terrain, the type of vegetation, the orientation to the sun, and many, many, many other conditions. And we realized that we are able to organize in cell formation even in orthogonal logic. Even within an existing infrastructure, we are able to build cell formation. They're not as beneficial, but they are close. And then again, the choice of which cell formation to work with depends on many factors that we are working with. So when we are talking about our behavior, when we think about how we are going to behave when our communities are organized in cell formation, we already know that the round table discussion is a way for us to create equality. It's a way for us to build trust. It's a way for us to respect one another. So imagine the type of social behavior that we're going to have when we are no longer organizing ourselves on lines, but starts organizing ourselves as communities. Now let's talk about safety, and let's talk about flow. I lived in Manhattan for 20 years. Every intersection is a place of conflict. Every intersection is a dangerous zone, right? So if you go 20 blocks, you are 20 times being confronted with a conflict. A normal intersection have 16 points of collision. That basically means that there are 16 different areas in which you can collide. Three ways intersection, there are only 3 points of collision, which basically means that you can move traffic much faster and much safer in that type of environment and get to work a lot more relaxed. Over the last several years, there has been so many studies that shows the benefits of living in nature, from cognitive behavior to productivity to stewardship to our desire to spend more time being active. So we look at this as a new design logic. A new design logic that is no longer human-centric, is now life-centric. And with that, we get a whole new exposure to a new vocabulary of possibilities, to a new forms for the cities. So what we used to call the super block is now the super cell, which ideally is going to be designed with more modular construction methods, with more productized approaches, which we're going to see very, very, very fast changing in the next few years. So let's experience what it's like being in a cell. When I send my kids downstairs, I don't need to worry that they're going to cross a road because there are no more roads. The pedestrian path is completely separated from the vehicular circulation. But this is the very first time in history in which we are able to live both in high density and with access to nature. When we are talking about the amount of outdoor space, when we are talking about the enormous amount of balconies that we are creating with this type of approach, we can realize that there is tremendous benefits to this kind of organization that allows us to experience a lot more light and a lot more exposure to vegetation. The ability to basically construct much faster because all of your deployment system is done in a circular motion. So, imagine a scenario in which you can have half the road and road infrastructure, much faster flow for traffic and much safer, and a quarter of the land being parks and recreational space, a faster construction time, and a massive improvements of the quality of life. Today, I want to share with you that I'm on a search. I'm on a search for leaders. I'm on a search for mayors, governors, developers, architects, urban planners that cares about the future of ecological harmony. I believe that it's time. It is time for us to think beyond sustainability. It is time for us to mimic what nature has been doing so brilliantly over the last 4.5 billion years.